With some of the girls starting to get bigger, we're getting to a point where we're gonna need to move them out to the chicken coop soon, and that means that we need to keep all of their stuff, their food, hay, any of the other rigmarole that they need, keep it handy nearby. So I really need to build the shed, but lumber prices are still just insane right now. So I'm gonna attempt to use any kind of like scrap lumber that I have, leftover plywood or OSB, any kind of materials that I have left over, attempt to build the shed using all that, basically at no cost. So we're gonna give that a shot and see how it goes. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. More on that a little bit later. The first thing to do was clear the space for the shed. It's gonna live here, off to the left side of the coop on this existing concrete pad. This area has been a catch-all for salvaged landscape materials such as large rocks, brick pavers, and stuff like that. I cleared the area and gave it a really thorough cleaning. The space is clear, so let's get right into building the shed. I used 2x4s to make the base. The footprint of the shed will be 5 feet wide and 2.5 feet deep. It has to be big enough to hold everything, but not so big that you can't open the door or walk past it. With the materials I'm able to use, the floor will have to be broken up into 2 parts. So at the 4-foot mark, I added a 2x4 board to support the split where 2 pieces will meet. This is where I start getting creative with my scrap pieces. This will make up the large part of the floor, and this will make up the rest. It's all screwed down with exterior screws. I had a general idea of how high I'd like to make the shed, but here's where I figured out exactly how high to make it. I prefer it to not tower over anything, just subtly live in the corner with a purpose. I also have to consider what materials I have and how best to maximize those materials to finish the build. Let's frame it up. The front of the shed is important because it has the doorway that you can see here. Now, I also do something a little unconventional. The corners are made of 2x6s that are awkwardly extended in one direction. There's a reason for this, and it has to do with adding siding that I'll discuss later on. I was running out of boards, so the back framing is quite bizarrely put together, but still sturdy enough for this little shed. The back wall is taller than the front, so the roof is slanted, and it's just toe-nailed into the base. Stability will come in a little bit. At the top, I use 2x10 boards to connect the front and back walls. They're connected on the inside, and make the distance apart at the top the same as at the bottom. There was one last full-size sheet of OSB in my stock. I'm glad I held on to it because now it's pure gold. This can't make up the entire backside, but it can be the majority of it. A larger scrap piece finished the back wall. The backside won't get siding because it'll just be up against the wall. Next up is the roof. My supply of scrap pieces is getting smaller and smaller. So in order to fully cover up the roof, it had to be broken up into 3 pieces. Then I spliced together pieces to make the front face around the doorway. I don't have enough material to cover the sides. That's okay though, because I planned for that. At the top, I added some blocking for the siding and trim. Then I took some measurements to calculate how much trim I needed to buy. Unfortunately, that isn't something I had in stock, but I did find the trim lumber at a good price. Before adding trim, there was one more piece of OSB that needed to be added above the doorway to match the wall elevation with the area around it. Placing the trim was a relatively easy process. I started at the top with the front and back pieces. Then I connected those with pieces that had to be cut with a slight diagonal. There's about a 4-inch drop from the back of the roof to the front. Vertical trim pieces go on all the corners and around the doorway. I didn't add trim to the backside, with the exception of the piece that's already on the top. Time for siding. I brought out all the siding for the shed. These are leftovers from the coop, which are leftovers from the workshop siding. I started with the front face of the shed. A bunch of pieces are all cut to the same size, so I cut them all at once. Before putting the first layer on, you have to add a starter strip so the bottom kicks out like the rest of the layers will. In order to get a consistent overlap, I used a small piece cut to the size of the ideal amount exposed. This worked really well as a spacing guide as I added each layer. Onto the sides. This is why I didn't need to put OSB on the sides. I framed it in a way that there's enough surface area on the studs to nail the siding into. At this point, I didn't have long enough scrap pieces to finish the sides. However, I did have some full-length pieces stored away that I could use to finish this job. At the top of the wall, the last pieces had to be cut with the diagonal. This is where that extra blocking really came in handy. The very last piece at the top was too small to nail. It probably would split, so I used construction adhesive instead. The other side got the same deal. Some of the trim had a bit of an overlap, so I used a router with a flush trim bit to make it nice. This is just a shed, so I didn't add any house wrap material, though I did go through and caulked all the corners, seams, nail holes, and screw heads. It's ready to be painted, but if I'm gonna spray it the same way as the coop, I need to move it somewhere else. With the addition of the siding, it's pretty dang heavy. Not to worry though, this problem was solved a long time ago. I cleared some space for the move and lifted it just enough to get some PVC pipe scraps underneath. I kept inching it along, moving the pieces that spat out the back. Once it was in a centralized place away from the surrounding objects, I placed some boards under it to lift it above the grass. This shed gets painted the same way as the coop. The airless sprayer makes quick work of this job. You just have to add paint, plug it in, and you're off. I'll post a link below to the one I'm using. I wouldn't paint a house with it, but it's great for medium projects like this. It would be hard to paint the shed with a roller or brush because of all the small edges, so I'm glad this was a quick step. I'm not worried about getting paint on the grass. It'll disappear after 2 or 3 mows. After the paint dried, I decided to do the roof while I had easy access all the way around. First step is the edge flashing. Next is the starter strip that goes on 3 sides. And last is the shingles. I almost had enough to do the entire roof, but had to buy another bundle to finish it. The top row flapped over the back edge, so I trimmed it down to have a much smaller overlap. Just like before, I used PVC as rollers to move the shed back into place. It looks really good next to the coop. It'll be a great addition to store all the chicken stuff, as well as a bunch of yard tools. Now it's time to make the door. If you watched the previous chicken coop videos, I'm following the same process as the door for the coop. It's quite literally just a bigger version of that door. The only difference, other than the size, is I'm following a slightly different order to make painting it easier. Once I had all the frame pieces together, I painted it black. I laid out all the boards for the backside, then painted them white before attaching. This way, I can be much less precise instead of having to carefully paint the inside edges. Then I marked and cut the boards, and attached them with a bunch of brad nails. These are all 1/4 inch thick cedar tongue and groove boards. The door was complete, so I brought it over and attached it with hinges, making sure it had a small clearance all the way around. I added 2 barrel locks to keep it secure, and a handle that matched the rest. If you're looking to improve your productivity like me, be sure to check out Skillshare, where you can learn about a multitude of topics such as photography, music, and web development. I've already taken classes in animation, film and video, and productivity. I took Thomas Frank's class Productivity for Creatives, where he walks you step by step through building a productivity system that works for you. This time, specifically for people aiming to do creative work. Though if you're already productive, you can use your time wisely by taking some of the thousands of options that Skillshare has to offer. Plus, they're always launching new classes, so let your creativity run wild. Start learning new skills today with a free trial by being one of the first 1,000 to use the link in the description. And this thing is done. It's pretty cool that I was able to build it using almost all scrap and leftover materials. Obviously, all the chicken stuff, the food, the treats, extra things will all go in this shed. There's plenty of extra space to hold yard tools and such. It's going to be great to have a reliable storage shed right next to the coop. Plus it matches, so it looks like it's meant to be there. Okay, that's it for now. See ya.
Hi.